sadly, just because we need to, harsh our buzz a little bit, because I was going to float away from Schadenfreude. The Judge Eileen Cannon, the Trump appointee, has initially been assigned to oversee his case. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so here's what I'm hoping, Steph. I hope that judicial assignment does not stand because Judge Aileen Cannon basically disqualified herself as a fair, independent, impartial judge when she appointed the special master on the front end of the Mar-a-Lago documents crimes investigation. And the reason I say she disqualified herself, she basically tried to interfere with the criminal investigation that DOJ was conducting of Donald Trump. That's not my characterization. That's the characterization of the appellate court that told her when they reversed her special master ruling nonsense that you have no right to interfere in an ongoing DOJ investigation regarding these documents that the FBI seized from Mar-a-Lago. I don't think she should remain the judge on this case because it starts out with a perception of unfairness. That's not good for anybody.
Well, I guess what lay people want to know is how did this happen? Because as you said, we all know that the story you're talking about, that she was obviously a Trump hack that disqualified herself early on. How does this happen? And talk to us to the second part of that about having the case in Florida instead of D.C.
Yeah, here's how it happened. So decades as a federal prosecutor, the way judicial assignments are supposed to happen, and the way, in my experience, Steph, they always did happen, is there is what's called the wheel, right? Every judge in every federal district court has his or her name on, figuratively speaking, a wheel. And that wheel sort of ticks one judge every time a new case comes in. And it is a completely random assignment process. So if they followed the ordinary course, she was what we say she's the next one up on the wheel. That's why she received that case. I think it's unwise to let her keep the case. But, if you now take her off it and assign another judge, it will create as many problems, at least public perception problems, as it remedies. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. Why it's down in Florida is a great question. It's this thing called venue. It's a fancy legal term for where did the defendant commit most of the crimes? He committed most of the crimes in Florida. That's why Jack Smith indicted him in Florida.
Because the other thing he took away, though, is Trump's whining about, D.C. not fair, totally Biden blah, blah, blah country, because Miami, or obviously Florida, voted for Trump. So he's taken that.
I agree that it took that away, but he'll find other stuff to whine about.
No, of course. But there's also, isn't there a venue thing going on at the Supreme Court? There was another reasoning that I was hearing about why Jack Smith chose Florida instead of D.C.
Yeah, so there is an active case before the Supreme Court involving the question of venue. I have not done a deep dive into it, but there is a precedent in federal court in D.C. The federal law is the federal law. However, Steph, the different circuits, the different federal appellate court circuits can decide cases differently. And so there are actually different laws by precedent in the different federal circuits. D.C. has one that says, look, you got to bring the case where the obstruction occurred. And the obstruction occurred in the main down in Florida. So if Jack Smith had brought the case in D.C., he would have had to have contended with that bad appellate law in D.C. He decided to cut it to the quick and just bring it in Florida.
Avoid that lengthy legal argument entirely. So let's talk about, was there anything you're surprised about? I mean, I think when it finally happens, remember we kept saying this, that, justice seems like it's never going to come, and then it comes all at once. And when you're reading the 7 counts, you're just like, oh my God, this is really as serious and the first time in our history as we think it is, right? Trump has been charged with 7 counts. Obviously I had to review the Manhattan District Attorney. That was 34 counts of falsifying business records. So we're only 2 indictments in here, but talk to us about this particular one, anything you were surprised about. And it was espionage and obstruction, correct? And tell us about conspiracy.
and
But tell
conspiracy.
us, is that different than just regular obstruction of justice, conspiracy to obstruct? Is that a different
Yeah.
statute? Okay.
So obstruction of justice would be me telling a witness, you better not snitch on me, when I knew there was a criminal investigation going on into my alleged crimes. That's obstructing. If you and I, Steph, get together and say, you know what, here's what we're going to do. You and I are both going to go at that witness and try to prevent them from testifying against me. Now I've entered into a conspiracy to obstruct justice because I'm now in an agreement to commit a criminal offense. So, first of all, I wasn't shocked at any of the charges, but I will say I was really pleased. There's several charges for mishandling classified documents.
Yeah.
There is a violation of our nation's espionage laws, the Espionage Act, by mishandling, perhaps disseminating national defense information. That's a big deal. And the conspiracy to obstruct is really consequential because that means Jack Smith has evidence that at least one other person, and likely multiple people, were part of Donald Trump's criminal conspiracy to try to get away with these crimes. The reason that's so important is really twofold. One, it means that there are people who have every reason to flip or who have already flipped against Donald Trump. So I can't wait for the indictment to be unsealed so I can read the conspiracy indictment and see if it names the co-conspirators, to see if it charges the co-conspirators, or to see if it says individual one, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, is an unindicted co-conspirator. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's Mark Meadows.
Yeah.
So there's so many opportunities for an investigation to move forward when there is a conspiracy charge.
Does that mean, is that a separate charge, or does that mean witness tampering? I thought I also heard that out there.
Okay. A conspiracy to commit a crime. Let's say we conspire to commit a bank robbery. So you go out and you steal the getaway car. I go out and buy a gun. And then we both say, you know what? Stupid idea. We're not going to rob the bank. Guess what? We've already committed the crime of conspiracy to rob the bank. Why? Because we entered into the agreement to do it, and we did at least one thing in the direction of committing the crime, which is called the overt act. A conspiracy is separately punishable. You get a separate sentence for being in a conspiracy as you get for committing the crime you agreed to commit.
Two things I like about it being in Florida is, one thing, I think, most prosecutors are saying it's because Jack Smith appears to be really confident he can get a conviction anywhere, that, it is a more favorable venue than D.C. for Trump. But, number two, I was going to say, I'm sorry, I lost the thought. No, but number two is what we mentioned earlier, Chris, the rocket docket, that he can't do his usual delay in Florida. Is that another factor, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. If it was in the Eastern District of Virginia, which I'm more familiar with because it's right across the river from federal court in D.C., that is the rocket docket. I think they coined the phrase, and they go to trial very quickly. In a case like this, Steph, with a former president and what is probably going to be several co-conspirators, this is going to be a fairly long, drawn-out affair. Let me just say the law, the Speedy Trial Act, says we're supposed to take somebody to trial within 70 days of him being arraigned. His arraignment will be on Tuesday. No federal case is ever tried. Rarely is a federal case ever tried within 70 days. The defense wants more time. They move for continuances. Motions are filed, which stops the speedy trial clock from running. So if I had to guess, I would say we're going to see a trial date set somewhere between about 8 and 12 months from the day he's arraigned in court next week.
Huh. Wow.
That's going to put it right in the middle of
primary season.
Yeah. Like
it is. And most importantly, we need to get this case tried and resolved before the election, because the stuff of nightmares, as I was discussing on air with Jen Psaki the other day, the stuff of nightmares for me is that the case is still pending. Donald Trump gets reelected. He appoints another corrupt attorney general and instructs that person to dismiss the criminal case against him, or he pardons himself.
I was going to ask that.
I don't think presidential self-pardons are a thing. I think the courts would strike them down because that would put a criminal president above the Supreme Court. I don't think they're going to sanction that. But still, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night.
Yes, it could happen.
On the sunny side, Travis, our dream could come true. He could be running from prison, third party. That would be fantastic. Okay.
But if he wins, he could pardon himself, and all this will go away.
No. But if he runs third party,
Yeah.
Biden's going to win.
Okay.
Okay. So, Glenn, the other thing we were just saying, do we need any other winnesses except Donald Trump against himself? Oh my God.
No.
Lordy, there are
Here's the
more
beauty-
tapes.
here's the
These
beauty
tapes
of
that
the-
CNN of him. I mean, is this a prosecutor's dream? He's saying all of
Yeah.
it. Look at this is secret, classified. I'm not allowed, but look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
Steph, it is the prosecutor's dream, and what I want to set everybody's mind at ease, because the rules of evidence say a prosecutor can introduce any flippant statement of a defendant that the prosecutor wants to introduce. So what the prosecutors will do is introduce very surgically every incriminating statement of Donald Trump. Not only one incriminating statement, but what they will do is they'll play one statement that says, hey, I declassified the documents with my mind, or the minute I took them from the White House, they were all automatically declassified. And then the prosecutors will immediately thereafter play Donald Trump saying, I'd like to show you this, but it's classified 6 months after he left the presidency. What you're doing is you're convicting Donald Trump using only his own words. But here's the best news. Whereas the rules of evidence allow prosecutors to put all of the incriminating statements before the jury, they're called statements of a party opponent, the rules prohibit Donald Trump's lawyers from putting a single statement Donald Trump made out of court before the jury. So the jury will never hear him stand up and say, the Presidential Records Act, I had every right to take it, because that's inadmissible evidence.
Yeah.
The defense is not allowed to put it in. That's why in the court of public opinion, this case looks one way. In a court of law, a novice prosecutor could convict Donald Trump in his or her sleep.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, yeah, that, I mean, I'm just a layperson, but I'm like, oh my God, this is like the most evidence I've ever seen. You mentioned Mark Meadows. You said Mark Meadows testifies in grand jury about both the insurrection and Trump's classified documents, crimes, indictments draw nearer by the day. You said, under what circumstances did Meadows testify in the grand jury? Did he plead guilty under seal and become a cooperating witness, or was he testifying under a grant of immunity? Important distinction. I mean, that's going to be interesting to find out. Is he implicated in? Well, clearly he's implicated in both of these crimes, right? January 6th and the documents. But what do you think is happening with him?
I think Jack Smith went hard, appropriately so. I think he forced or convinced Mark Meadows to plead guilty. It's under seal, so it hasn't yet been disclosed publicly. To plead guilty, to accept responsibility for his crimes, and to agree to testify truthfully against Trump and anybody else about whom he has information that they committed crimes. Here's why I say that. If he's testifying under a grant of immunity, then you're giving him a pass for all of his crimes, and his credibility is lower than, well, you know what, because the defense attorney at trial will argue you can't trust a word out of his mouth, because that prosecutor right there gave Mark Meadows a pass, said you will never have to spend a minute in jail for the crimes you committed. So Mark Meadows is going to say anything that prosecutor wants him to say to convict Donald Trump. That's a powerful line of cross-examination that I've dealt with hundreds of times. So we have a concrete example of a chief of staff to the president of the United States committing crimes together with or to cover up the crimes of a president, Richard Nixon and Bob Haldeman. Bob Haldeman didn't get an immunity deal.
Yeah.
Bob Haldeman didn't plead guilty and become a cooperator. So what did the prosecutors do? They took Bob Haldeman to trial. They convicted him of obstruction, conspiracy, and perjury, and they put him in prison.
Yeah.
So Mark Meadows, I believe, has been held accountable for his crimes, is flipped. He's cooperating.
Wow.
And ultimately, he will still see the inside of a prison.
Oh, this is a yay. One last one real quick. We're long as usual. Someone tweeted up to 34 House Republicans texted with Meadows about overthrowing the 2020 election. They wanted to keep up the fight, make sure Trump stayed in the White House. Considering Meadows pled out and flipped, there are 34 nervous traitors today. We keep asking that. When are the congressional shoes going to drop here? Particularly the ones trying to, falsely accuse Biden of something to distract, right?
Yeah, if I can quote and paraphrase Al Pacino from Scent of a Woman, Jack Smith's just getting warmed up. I mean, I think we are going to see insurrectionists in Congress potentially held accountable for what they did. At least that is my fervent hope.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of hope, for all of you that called us, hope mongers or selling you hopium, blow it out your ass today.
He hasn't been convicted.
Imagine how lit Sexy Liberal
Yes.
LA, the indictment tour, is going to be October 21st in LA with
Yep.
Glenn Kirschner on panel.
Yeah.
Glenn, thanks so much. What a great day. What a great day
Thanks,
for
Steph.
America. All right. Love you.
Thanks, Glenn.
50 minutes
Love
after
you,
the
Steph. See you guys.
50 minutes after the hour, this portion of the show brought to you by Hi, Rude. Hi.
Hi.
How are
It's
you
so
enjoying-
Good to see your face.
We missed you. So how are you enjoying your orange sky? Don't you think that's a sign